everybody. This is Pastor Brady Henderson, the senior pastor at Gaston's First Baptist Church, and you are listening to the Menorah Podcast. I'm here today with our co-host and my dear friend, Brother Al. Say hey to him, Al.
Hey guys, how we doing?
So it is hard to believe, Alan, but I believe we are already on episode 23.
We are.
And so happy 4th of July to everybody that's taken time to listen to today's episode. You might be, maybe your 4th of July was busy, so you might be listening to this after. Whatever the case, we want to thank you for tuning in. This is the first time in a while, Alan, that we haven't been talking about family matters. Many of our listeners, hopefully you're aware, the last 4 episodes, we did a mini-series on Family Matters, which is a curriculum that I wrote and took many of our young families through not too long ago. So heard a lot of great feedback. Just want to thank everybody for tuning into that. Hopefully that was able to bless you. And like I've said before, all of our episodes are archived. You can find them on YouTube on the Menorah tab playlist, and so make sure if you want to re-listen to them, feel free to do that. So since today is July the 4th, we thought about doing a patriotic theme, but I wanted to talk a little bit today, Brother Al, about some statistics from Lifeway. Some of our listeners might not be aware that not too long ago, just a little less than a month ago, Hannah and I went to the Southern Baptist Convention in Indianapolis and represented our church. You know, when you're there, Alan, there's this huge exhibit hall, and they just give you all kind of stuff. Books, pamphlets, all this kind of, that kind of thing, pens and stuff. And so one of the things that I got at one of the booths was Lifeway was giving out statistic books. And apparently they give these out every year. This is just my second convention. But this year's is called Pew to Pew. And they have a research team at Lifeway that comes up with all of this. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit today about their report, some of the statistics, and I'll be sharing these at some of our worship services, during the welcome or whatever, kind of just throwing that in from time to time. But just want to talk about these because I think these are really, really interesting. And I'm thankful that Lifeway puts the time into it to do that and to provide that for churches. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I did want to open up and talk about one that I thought was very, very interesting. This study talks a lot about church switching, which is what I've always referred to as church hopping. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stats on that. The one that sticks out to me, and we'll look at a variety of these. I want to hear what you think about this, Alan. They found statistics on COVID-19 and how COVID-19 has impacted church hopping. So here's what it says. The pandemic influenced 13% of church switches. Reasons for switching during the pandemic range from temporary church closures, which was 55% of them, to disagreements over COVID-19 policies, 19%, and 9% of that 13% said they had to move churches because their church closed. And so there's many things you could dissect from that statistic. I think the one that kind of gets to me is I haven't thought about it a lot. I know a lot of churches have struggled, but I didn't realize how many churches have closed. And I think that COVID really, for churches that were struggling prior to the pandemic, I think it kind of wiped them out. I know in South Carolina, before the pandemic, there were 2,150 churches in our state convention, and now we're at 1,996. So we've lost, that is 154, roughly. I'm estimating here. 154 churches since 2020.
I know of a few churches that are still struggling a little bit, but I don't think I know of any that actually closed.
Yeah, I know of a few, but not too terribly many. I do know that in our state specifically, a lot of them were in the low country. Mm-hmm. A lot of those areas are getting more rural as Myrtle Beach, Charleston, Columbia, and Greenville keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and you could add Augusta and Charlotte into that too. So people are leaving those areas pretty quickly. But it's also sad because South Carolina is one of the fastest growing states. And that's why these statistics are so important for us in South Carolina to remember. Okay, here we go. When churchgoers, here's another statistic. When churchgoers are visiting a new church, the first event or activity they will likely attend is a worship service. 68% of people said they're more likely to attend a worship service maybe before going to the Harvest Festival or maybe before going to VBS. And I think that's interesting.
Well, I do too. It kind of restores a little bit my thoughts on humanity to know that they feel like that the worship service is one of the important parts of a church, and they're going to participate in something, not just to be entertained or get something free.
And here's what's really interesting. These statistics I'm going to share, because when I think of Gaston First, I think of a church where most of the people here. When I was coming, 100 was a good Sunday. So most of those people that when I came in, I know a lot of them have passed, but most of those people have been here their whole lives.
Yep.
And if it wasn't their whole lives, it was a long time. And now we're getting a lot of these new families and these young families, and that's great. But there's still a lot of people here that have been going here a long time. Where I'm from in the upstate, my part of the woods, and Hannah would agree with me here, there were about 4 or 5 churches in our community where if one church was doing really well, all the quote-unquote church hoppers would go there. And then they'd go there, and then they'd go there. And I don't see that as much down here. Roots run a lot deeper down here. And I remember, even youth would do it. If a certain youth group was large and popping and things were happening, the youth would go there. I know people in my hometown that in 10 years, they've moved their membership 4 times. That is a very common thing. So this statistic really stuck out to me. So among United States Protestant or non-denominational churchgoers, only 53% of adults have attended more than one church.
That's pretty good.
So that means that would be 47%. I believe I got that right. 47% have been in one church as an adult. That's remarkable to me. 60% say a residential move play a role in their decision to change churches. So, I hope in the early 2000s, many churches dealt with what we call worship wars. I think we're starting to get away from that. I've really noticed that in the younger generation. I've had younger people come up to me and say, we love the hymns, we love the contemporary, we love it all, as long as it honors and glorifies Jesus. And I think that's important. And it's not about who's singing; it's about what we're singing. So I think that is really, really good to do. So here's another statistic. So it talks about creating a welcome environment. And since you and I are kind of media guys, we gravitate naturally more to that side of things. Lifeway lists 5 resources that people use to find a new church. Now, this is interesting. 69% of people looking to find a new church make an in-person visit. Even with the rise of streaming, I would say most people prefer to make an in-person visit. Now, I know a lot of people here, before they come, they've watched online. Some of them for months, some of them for years, some of them for a week, right? So it is still a good tool. 54% of people find a new church by a recommendation from family, friends, neighbors, or colleagues.
I don't find that really surprising because I think that if I were looking for a church and or needed to change churches or whatever for whatever reason,
Yeah.
I think that I would probably look online just to kind of get a feel for what is out there, what is
Yeah.
close to me, what is the most convenient, and then probably explore a little deeper again online. But you don't really get a feel for a church when you when you watch a service online.
Correct.
You get a feel for the doctrine.
Yes.
You get a feel for their beliefs,
Worship style.
which you will read on their
Yep.
website oftentimes anyway.
Yep.
But you don't get the feel of how to become part of
the
a group.
body.
Exactly.
And I think that's the important thing about the church, and I do think that is a bad thing about COVID, is that, and I was talking to a pastor earlier this week, there are still people that still have not come back to church. You could say that about every church. I think every church has experienced that to a certain level. Another resource that people are using to find churches, 40% of people that find a new church go to the website. That makes sense. I was surprised by this one. Only 32% go to the Facebook page. That one kind of surprised me. Our Facebook page gets a lot of traffic, but then I started thinking, not all churches have Facebook pages. That's not really a new thing. COVID kind of accelerated that, but some of them don't. And
Yeah, I think COVID probably was the number one factor in churches becoming active on Facebook simply because it was so easy.
oh yeah,
I mean, literally a one button
yep,
press to stream your service. And I know a lot of churches did that. In the beginning, they were streaming from their phones, and yeah, I can see that.
yep. I think what's interesting, they give tips on ways to be visitor friendly. And one of them is highly visible video content on the website, discipleship content, online giving, and a list of ministry or upcoming events. We have three of the four. And the discipleship content is something that we've added. You can find the sermons that are preached by me in the pulpit. Those notes are on the website, so you can look at those. We also have a preaching plan, Bible reading plans, different things to be able to choose from. And I think these statistics are also interesting. So they polled churchgoers how they were first introduced to their church. 30% say a friend or acquaintance invited me. One statistic, doesn't have to do with Lifeway, but one thing I read a few weeks ago is that somebody is 82% more likely to go to church if they're invited by a friend. And there's a 6% chance that they'll go if the pastor invites them. And I think that's interesting for several reasons. Number one, people expect the pastor to do that because he is the leader of the church. In many ways, he's kind of the face. In many ways, he's the one doing the calls, the one doing the preaching. They know that voice. They expect that invitation to come from him. Now, when a friend invites, it's like, wow, my friend trusts this church enough to take their kids there. My friend trusts this church enough to teach this doctrine and do, whatever. It's going to be much more convincing that way. Does that make sense?
It does. If I have a friend that tells me I have bought this car,
Yep.
certain make, model car, and it's been great, I am going to put much more weight on that because I know my friend. I've been around my friend. I know his values, and I believe what he says much more than I do some slick guy that I know has been hired to tell me what a great car this is.
Exactly.
Or a salesman that I have been talking to for 10, 15 minutes. And, people tend to be a little more skeptical these days because so much of what you see and so much of what you hear
Oh, yeah.
is misleading.
Oh, yeah.
It's not out and out lying, but it's kind of very misleading as to what they're really saying.
Yep. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think it's interesting, too, that 86% of people polled said that the beliefs and doctrine of the church were very important in them choosing a church. 86% also said that preaching was a major part of their decision on what church they're going to go to, which is all good signs. A unity among the members, 82% care
That's
strongly
very important.
about that. All these things.
Yes.
Care for the community, 81%. This one needs to go down, but worship style was 81%. It needs to go down. But, I understand why people feel that way. But my take on that is if it honors God, if it's biblically sound, doctrinally sound, it's okay to sing different stuff. There's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. 77% want members that they can build relationships with. 70% care about location. 69% care about worship times. That's interesting. This one concerns me. 67% care about which denomination the church is in. I think should be more around the 90s at least. Denomination is really important, especially today with kind of what's going on. 64% of churchgoers go to a church based on the opportunities to serve. This one is kind of tough, but 62% of churchgoers want church members to be similar to them. I understand that, but at the same time, our churches should look like our communities. And then only 41% care about the size of the church. So these are just a few statistics for you to think about, for you to mull over. I hope you have a happy July 4th. We're going to go ahead and wrap this episode up. Alan, any closing thoughts you have today?
It just gives us a little something that we can think about and look toward maybe some ways we can reach out to our community a little more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the purpose of statistics at the end of the day. So thank you guys for tuning in. Do want to ask you to tune in next week. That'll be the 24th episode of the Menorah Podcast. We're going to be discussing the three men that are going to be coming and preaching in our homecoming revival coming up soon in August. So we're going to talk about that next Thursday, July the 11th. But today is July the 4th. We thank you for tuning in to the Menorah Podcast. The podcast seeks to share the light, speak the light, and send the light all across the airwaves of the internet. Have a great July 4th. We love you. Bye-bye.